I'm Nadia Jani and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. US President Donald Trump says he will meet Putin in Hungary for Ukraine talks. Egypt to host reconstruction summit as international partners back Gaza recovery plan. And Pakistan and Afghanistan are set to hold key talks in Doha on Friday under a Qatari initiative. First, US President Donald Trump says he plans to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin in Budapest for a second round of talks. It comes after what he called was a productive call with Putin a day before Ukraine president is due to visit the White House. Trump has repeatedly hinted that he might supply Ukraine with long-range missiles, which would help Kyiv strike Moscow with accuracy and destructive ammunition. Here's more on that story.
In a move that could reshape diplomacy on the Ukraine war, US President Donald Trump and Russia's Vladimir Putin plan to meet in Budapest within roughly 2 weeks. The decision followed a 2.5-hour phone call described by both sides as productive and candid, and it lands hours before Trump hosts President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House.
Thank you, Libby, very much.
Trump says preparations are advancing quickly, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio coordinating with Russia's Sergei Lavrov on timing and venue. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has offered to host, underscoring Budapest's ambition to cast itself as a bridge during war.
I would say within 2 weeks or so, pretty quick. Marco Rubio is going to be meeting with his counterpart, as you know, Lavrov. And they'll be meeting pretty soon. They're going to set up a time and a place very shortly. But I'll be meeting with President Putin, and we'll make a determination. Tomorrow I'm meeting with President Zelensky, and I'll be telling him about the call.
The Kremlin's senior foreign policy aide, Yuri Ushakov, called it their 8th conversation this year, saying the two leaders focused on a political and diplomatic solution. He insisted Russia holds the strategic initiative along the front, while acknowledging Trump's push for rapid peace and post-war US-Russia economic prospects. But weapons policy could make or break the talks. Kyiv wants long-range Tomahawks to hit deep targets. Putin warns such deliveries would severely damage relations and undercut negotiations. Trump confirmed the missiles came up, even turning to humour to signal leverage.
I did actually say, would you mind if I gave a couple of thousand Tomahawks to your opposition? I did say that to him. I said it just that way. He didn't like the idea. He really didn't like the idea. No, I said it that way. You have to be a little bit lighthearted sometimes, but no, he doesn't want Tomahawk is a vicious weapon. It's a vicious, offensive, incredibly destructive weapon. Nobody wants Tomahawk shot at him.
On Capitol Hill, pressure is building for new Russia sanctions. Trump says the timing must align with diplomacy, arguing any move now should not derail what he calls a rare opening.
We want to get peace. We want to stop the killing. 7,000 people a week. Can you believe it? We want to stop the killing. So I'm going to speak to him and the speaker, Mike Johnson. I'll speak to them a little bit later and I'll tell them about this. And we'll make the right determination.
Yes, but after that.
Logistically, Trump hints Zelensky and Putin may be seen separate but equal, if staging joint encounters proves impossible, keeping channels open while tensions run high. With fresh Russian strikes still battering Ukraine's energy grid and Kyiv pressing for longer-range firepower, Budapest now carries outsized stakes talks that could freeze the battlefield or fracture over missiles and sanctions.
Staying on Ukraine, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has arrived in Washington for a high-level meeting with US President Donald Trump. His main goal is to secure additional military aid as Kyiv continues to push back Russian forces amid escalating attacks on its energy infrastructure.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arrived in Washington for a critical meeting with US President Donald Trump. The main focus of the meeting is expected to be on military and energy issues. Since the Russian invasion began, Zelensky and Trump have met multiple times, navigating a tense but strategically critical relationship. Their first post-invasion encounter on February 28, 2025 at the Oval Office made headlines around the world for its sharp exchanges. Zelensky pressed the US to increase pressure on Russia.
During the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
3 months later, in April 2025, the two leaders met privately at St. Peter's Basilica during Pope Francis's funeral. Zelensky called the 15-minute encounter historic, aimed at strengthening Ukraine's military and advancing peace prospects.
How to stop the possibility to buy Russian oil and gas.
At the UN General Assembly in September 2025, Zelensky again pressed Trump in New York for stronger sanctions and action to stop European countries from buying Russian oil.
During this war, we need more pressure and more sanctions.
Zelensky's current Washington visit focuses on finalizing arms deals and expanding Ukraine's military capabilities. Since the full-scale invasion of Russia, the US has supplied $350 billion in military aid, including weapons, intelligence and training for Ukraine. Ukrainian officials are now pushing for advanced weapons like Tomahawk missiles, which could extend Kyiv's strike range, raise the costs of Russian aggression and strengthen its negotiating position, though such deliveries carry risks of escalating the conflict. The US and its allies have also ramped up pressure on major buyers of Russian oil to curb Moscow's revenue amid the war in Ukraine. President Trump said India has pledged to cut imports. Washington is also pressing China to follow suit. These diplomatic moves aim to tighten the economic squeeze on Russia as Kyiv and Moscow escalate attacks on energy infrastructure. Through repeated high-stakes meetings, Zelensky and Trump have shown that despite tensions, US support remains central to Ukraine's defense and the broader international effort to hold Russia accountable.
And it's in holding Russia accountable that Ukraine is pushing for US Tomahawk missiles. The long-range precision weapons would mark a new level of support for Ukraine's fight against Russia. But what difference could it really make on the battlefield?
Ukrainian forces have long pressed for weapons that could reach deep inside Russia. Chief among those requests are Tomahawk cruise missiles, long-range precision weapons that can strike targets from more than 1,000 miles away. Now, as Washington weighs whether to supply them, the question is what difference these missiles could make and at what cost. Tomahawks are not ordinary munitions. They're precision-guided and capable of striking with meter-level accuracy, often used to destroy command centers, refineries, and other high-value targets. They can be launched from ships, submarines, or compatible land launchers, giving Ukraine new reach far beyond the front line.
So a Tomahawk is a cruise missile, or most commonly a land attack cruise missile that has been developed by the US over several decades. They're most commonly seen being fired from ships or submarines, but there are ones you can fire from launchers on the land. And the suggestion is that they would provide some of these missiles, presumably with a launcher, for Ukraine to be able to strike deep into Russia and potentially attack military targets, energy, or other critical elements of the Russian military-industrial complex.
For Ukraine, That reach could shift the battlefield. Tomahawks would allow strikes on vital Russian logistics, ammunition depots, and supply routes, forcing Moscow to disperse its resources and rethink its strategy. Tomahawk missiles have been a key US weapon for decades. First deployed in combat during the 1991 Gulf War, they've since played major roles in conflicts across Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and Syria, often used in the opening stages of major operations to destroy air defenses and command centers. Their use has repeatedly given the US a decisive long-distance strike advantage, shaping the early course of modern wars. But experts warn Tomahawks are not a game changer on their own. They're expensive, limited in number, and require detailed intelligence and coordination to be used effectively. And the stakes go beyond the battlefield. Moscow has warned that sending Tomahawks to Ukraine would mark what it calls a new stage of escalation.
The former National Security Advisor to US President Donald Trump, John Bolton, has been criminally indicted on federal charges. The US Department of Justice presented a case to a grand jury in Maryland on Thursday. It was agreed there was enough evidence to indict Bolton, who issued a statement maintaining his innocence. Bolton has been charged with 8 counts of distributing national defense information and 10 counts of unlawful retention of national defense information, and could face decades in prison. Moving over to Gaza now, and US President Donald Trump has warned that further American action could follow if Hamas fails to uphold its ceasefire obligations in Gaza. Trump said, "We're going to find out if they behave. If they don't behave, we'll take care of it."
Well, I'm looking at what's happening, and that wasn't the deal that was made, and we'll see what happens. It's calmed down. It's a tough neighborhood. We know that. We have a commitment from them, and I assume they're going to honor that commitment. I hope they do. And I understand they brought back some additional bodies today. It's a rough deal when you think of it, right? Very rough. And we have our hostages back completely. We were very lucky with that. But it's a tough situation. They brought back bodies today, as you probably know. But they also said they're going to behave. We're going to find out if they behave. If they behave, good. If they don't behave, we'll take care of it.
In Gaza, the recovery phase is just beginning, with millions of tons of rubble to clear and homes and infrastructure to rebuild. Egypt, Qatar, Turkey and the US are backing the effort ahead of a major reconstruction summit in Egypt, as Palestinian Authority intend to work with international institutions to address Gaza's needs.
Egypt is preparing to host a major international conference in November on Gaza's reconstruction, a gathering that could shape the region's future after the US brokered ceasefire between Israel and Hamas and help coordinate global donors while ensuring funds are used transparently. Speaking in Ramallah, Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa outlined a 5-year, $67 billion recovery plan to rebuild Gaza. It covers homes, infrastructure, and the economy. He added that the plan has 3 stages: a 6-month emergency phase at $3.5 billion, a 3-year reconstruction at $30 billion, and a final phase completing the program.
Together, these phases provide a coherent pathway from relief to sustainable development, ensuring that immediate interventions are linked to institutional recovery, economic revival, and durable reconstruction.
If possible.
Mustafa said the Ramallah-based Palestinian Authority will work closely with global partners to address Gaza's security. The United Nations says nearly 55 million tons of debris, equal to about 13 pyramids of Giza, must be cleared in the first phase of Gaza reconstruction, highlighting the massive scale of the challenge.
So there's a big process underway to also look at the total damage that have been occurring throughout Gaza. A process called the Rapid Damage Needs Assessment was jointly conducted by the United Nations, the World Bank and the European Union. And that figure in February 2025 came to about $53 billion for the reconstruction needs. This figure is now being updated. We are working on a number of initiatives to also do the physical damage assessment, and we anticipate that the figure will significantly increase also because of the increase in damages.
In Gaza City, as the rubble lies, families and communities are facing the long road to recovery ahead of them.
Welcome back to A News. Now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will meet with US President Donald Trump in Washington today, which is Friday. It comes a day after Trump said great progress was made during a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin, with the pair agreeing to face-to-face talks in Hungary. Zelensky has called on the US to provide Ukraine with the advanced missiles which have a long range that will target Russian territory, something Putin is not too keen on. Joining me now to discuss this upcoming meeting and the Putin phone call is Gustavo de Aristogiou, former diplomat in Morocco. Welcome.
How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. My first question is the announcement that the two leaders, Trump and Putin, will meet in Hungary. It's quite interesting. Do you think it could lead to something more concrete than what we saw in August?
Most likely. In any case, what we can say is that a lot of analysts were speculating about the convenience of having held the Alaska summit, because it was rehabilitating President Putin when he had in fact become a pariah in the whole world, and that this gave him the world stage back. In fact, I can also tell you that seen with the perspective of the months that passed or the weeks that passed, a lot of the extremes in Europe, be it extreme left or extreme right, that had a inexplicable fascination with President Putin and his aggressive policies, have finally given up, because they needed to see that he was given the opportunity to do the right thing and he didn't. So there was no excuse to say that it was a provocation of NATO, the United States of Europe anymore. So now it's the second round of that. We've seen that the famous document that was leaked, the document of the FSB that was trying to prove to the president of Russia, that Russia, it wasn't in Russia's best interest to sign an immediate ceasefire, but to continue with the war at least until January of 2026. Well, we're very near that date, and we can see very clearly that that is the reason why, most likely, Russia has continued with the war. And last but not least, let us not forget that Russia has continued gaining terrain in the eastern front of Ukraine. Of the 4 provinces of the Donbas region, Russia controls, give or take, 70%. Besides, you see Royal Services study that I will mention later, it was known that the approximate equivalent of 80 football fields were being conquered by Russia every day. And recently there was a statement by the High Command that said that they had consolidated at that moment in the latest offensive 5,000 square kilometers of terrain. They do believe that whatever they conquer now is not going to be given back, because it is like whatever gains they make are going to be theirs forever. So whatever they conquered from 2014 onwards, even after the war of 22, is theirs for keeps. And this is why Putin has been pushing the war as far as he can. So the third thing that I wanted to say, right now, the President of the United States has gotten serious. He has seen that no good intentions in all of the good talk that he has had with President Putin in the past. So I believe this is what American media are saying, and some of my friends that know Washington very well, because I go there almost every 2 months, is that the conversation yesterday was cordial, that President Trump wouldn't take any good talk anymore. He wants results. And the reason why Putin called him immediately before the meeting of President Zelensky and today in Washington is precisely because of what you were saying in your program just a moment ago. because the precision and the lethal effectiveness of the Tomahawk missiles with the American intelligence could change the outcome of the war entirely.
And just on that, sorry,
range.
Yeah, and just on that, and that particular subject of the Tomahawks, do you think Trump is using that as leverage then to get Putin to end the war on Ukraine before he makes a decision whether or not he is going to provide long-range missiles to Ukraine?
Without any doubt. I think that it is a very smart move. And as you see, he has escalated things. He went from, I want Zelensky to be serious about peace, and he wasn't very nice to him in the Oval Office. Zelensky didn't have his best day either. Let's say things as they are. And then they said no more intelligence, no more Patriots, no more defensive weapons, no more offensive weapons. Then he said, okay, we're going to give you intelligence again. Okay, we're going to give you defensive weapons. We're going to upgrade your Patriot systems, and we are going to give you again offensive weapons. But quantum leap, going from the HIMARS, which is very effective but short range and was doing great harm to the Russian forces, to Tomahawk missiles with a 6-mile range. And that is really, really lethal. I think it was a very smart move.
Yes, and with that, obviously, as you mentioned, Trump will be meeting Zelensky today to discuss the military efforts that Ukraine is doing, and also Zelensky will be pushing for these long-range missiles. Obviously, Trump is playing a tightrope game in regards to this. Do you think Zelensky will get what he asked for? As you mentioned, there's a lot of things that the US are now giving over to Ukraine to help them.
I think that delivering Tomahawk missiles is not like buying books over the counter or aspirin. It takes weeks. You need to disarm some units that already have them, and you have to ask the producer to produce new ones so that they can replace those that are going to be given to Ukraine. There is a mark. I don't know how much. I need to look that intel, which will give the President of the United States the margin to see if Putin means business. And if he doesn't do anything that really amounts to accepting a fire and sitting on the negotiation table, the process of sending the Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine is going to go on.
I see. Okay, well, that's really interesting. Thank you so much for that. I think we'll leave it there. So thank you so much for your insights, Mr. Aristoglu. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. First, as part of the Turkey-Africa Business and Economic Forum in Istanbul, a wide range of discussions have begun on trade, energy, infrastructure and women's leadership. The event brings together 3,000 African business leaders and thousands of Turkish entrepreneurs who are exploring bilateral meetings and new partnership opportunities.
The Turkey-Africa Business and Economic Forum kicked off in Istanbul, organised by the Ministry of Trade of Turkey, the African Union and DEIC under the theme Strengthening Turkey-Africa Relations and Sharing Mutual Gains.
Turkish companies are ready to work on solar, wind, hybrid solution, microgrids and storage. With Africa's immense solar potential, green hydrogen stands out as a promising new frontier. Turkey's engineering expertise and financing capability can also help transform this potential into a global competitive advantage for the continent. In hydrocarbons, we see African energy basins have huge prospects and present opportunities for exploration and production.
The forum brought together 3,000 African business leaders and thousands of Turkish entrepreneurs. It served as a platform for meetings and new partnership opportunities. Discussions covered key sectors such as textiles, infrastructure, pharmaceuticals, women's leadership, food security, energy, aviation and digital trade. In 2024, trade between Turkey and Africa reached more than $37 billion. The target for 2025 is $40 billion.
All corridors are important. There is a massive need for investment on corridors in Africa. Ourselves, out of our 23,000 people, over 15,000 are working all along those corridors. And corridor is a combination of investment, people, knowledge, digitalization, and there are a lot of opportunity to invest. As an example, if you want to serve DRC efficiently, you need to be able to go through Eastern Africa, Tanzania. You need to be able to go through Southern Africa. You need to be able to, from western part of Africa, for instance, through Lobito, where we manage the port operation. And all these corridors are actually important to serve the big market of DRC.
The role of the private sector in Africa's economy is steadily growing, but many projects are still in the development stage due to insufficient profitability. Turkish Airlines now flies to 62 destinations across Africa. The Turkish Cooperation and Coordination Agency, TICA, also continues to run cultural and humanitarian projects throughout the continent. The forum emphasised Turkey's expanding economic ties with Africa and the potential for further trade and investment growth.
Policymakers have already played.
The third Azerbaijan National Urban Forum is wrapping up today in Baku, following 2 days of discussions in Khankendi. The final sessions have focused on how cities can become more resilient, innovative and sustainable in the face of climate change. Our correspondent has more.
The third Azerbaijan National Urban Forum is coming to a close today in Baku. After 2 days of discussions in Khankendi, the final sessions here in the capital have focused on climate resilience, innovation and partnerships for a greener urban future. The morning panels brought together experts from Azerbaijan, the Maldives, Israel and UNESCO to discuss how cities can adapt to climate change and strengthen disaster preparedness. Technology and finance were also high on the agenda. Speakers from Iran, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development and the Asian Development Bank shared insights on how innovation and new investments model can accelerate urban transformation. Closing discussions of the forum focused on regional cooperation and intersectoral partnerships. They also highlighted Azerbaijan's growing role as a bridge between local experience and global urban initiatives ahead of the World Urban Forum 13 in Baku next May. Over 3 days, NUFA 3 had brought together more than 1,200 participants from 64 countries, uniting government officials, urban planners and international organizations in shaping the cities of tomorrow. Sabina Abubekirova, A News.
A source within the Afghan government has confirmed to A News that high-level talks between Afghanistan and Pakistan are set to take place in Doha. A delegation from Kabul is expected to depart later today amid rising tensions and deadly clashes along the shared border. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
According to the government source, the discussions will focus primarily on extending the current ceasefire and finding a diplomatic solution to recent border incidents. No official confirmation has been given about who will lead the Afghan delegation, but local media are reporting that the country's defense minister, Yaqub Mujahid, is likely to head the talks. The meeting follows a week of escalating violence along the border region, where Afghan and Pakistani security forces have exchanged heavy fire. The Afghan Ministry of Defense has accused Pakistan of violating its airspace and carrying out airstrikes inside Afghan territory. Allegation Islamabad has neither denied nor accepted. According to the United Nations, the week-long skirmishes have already left more than 500 people dead or injured, raising alarm among international observers and regional allies. Talks in Doha are being viewed as a critical opportunity to prevent further bloodshed and re-establish a fragile truce between the two neighbors, both of whom have a long and complicated history of border disputes. For now, officials in both capitals are keeping quiet on the details. But with casualties mounting and international pressure growing, all eyes will be on Doha to see whether these talks can bring even a temporary calm. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Tajikistan has secured investment deals worth over $4 billion in its strategic sectors and its capital at the International Dushanbe Invest Forum. Fariza Kalimazana has the details.
The International Investment Forum has just concluded in the capital of Tajikistan, where 52 agreements and contracts were signed, totaling more than $4 billion, a record figure for the country. Nearly $500 million of this amount is dedicated to projects related to the development of Dushanbe itself. The remaining investments are directed towards Tajikistan's strategic sectors, including industry, energy, agriculture, transport infrastructure and tourism. Representatives from foreign governments, international financial institutions and business leaders from various countries attended the event. Key discussions focused on improving the investment climate and attracting direct foreign investment. A key highlight of the forum was the announcement that Tajikistan aims to become the first country in the CIS to develop lithium production, a crucial component for electric vehicle batteries. Sherali Kabir, Minister of Industry and New Technologies, also pointed out that Tajikistan holds reserves of 10 out of 12 metals critical for the global green transition, 6 of which are already produced domestically. He emphasized the country's intention to actively engage in new supply chains for rare earth metals. Participating in the forum, the deputy mayor of Dushanbe noted that foreign investment in the city reached $2.2 billion in the first half of this year. The capital is actively expanding its international ties, cooperating with 69 countries. This global engagement supports Dushanbe's strong economic growth, with the city's economy expanding at an average rate of 7.3% annually and consistently contributing around 20% to the country's national GDP. The forum also highlighted the importance of 4 major transport corridors crossing Tajikistan, which connect the country's markets with neighboring countries in the wider region, boosting foreign trade to Nova. Fariza Kalimazana, Almaty, A-News.
Welcome back to A News. Following Syria's interim president Ahmad al-Shara's visit to Moscow to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday, the face-to-face meeting was the first the pair had, and a number of topics were discussed, including the extradition of his predecessor, Bashar al-Assad. This is now a renewed interest in Syria under new leadership, and whether Russia can maintain its ties and influence in Syria, and whether this will impact its friendly neighbour Turkey, who is also interested in firming trade ties in energy. Now, here to help me unpack this is Dr. Mehmet Rakimpoglu, Assistant Professor at Mardin Akhtulu University. Welcome. First, my first question is, Syria and Russia leaders met for the first time this week, as I mentioned, but what were the main outcomes of this meeting?
Well, I think the meeting and the situation should be understood through a broader lens. Syria is not just redefining its relations with Russia. It also is seeking to recalibrate its relations with all major actors in the region and also in the globe. So this kind of policy stems from what many in Syria consider the people's victory, meaning that any future relationship must reflect the will and the interest of the Syrian people. So the current leadership led by Ahmed Shara in Damascus is acting with a pragmatic calculation rather than emotional or reactive instincts. So if it were driven by resentment, it wouldn't be engaging with Russia at all. So interim President Ahmed Shara is well aware that Syria cannot, or his position or the revolution could not survive without opening channels to all countries, including Russia.
I see. And Russia has highlighted its interest in the reorganization of military facilities, and as well as developing Syria's oil fields and expand cooperation in energy. What might Turkey think of that, considering its interest in collaborating in Syria's energy sector as well?
Well, actually, when it comes to talking about the relations with Russia and Syria, of course, as you know, the relationship between Russia and Syria is historically deep, dating back to the pre-revolutionary regime era. And Moscow has been long a counterweight to Western pressure. And for this reason, it is likely that the Moscow will seek to maintain and even strengthen ties with Russia. This is also a rational choice for Syrian people, and Turkey, which has been strictly supporting the revolution process, seems relatively comfortable with Syria maintaining a certain level of engagement with Russia. And since the fall of the Assad regime on December 8th last year, there has been no major crisis between Ankara and Moscow, despite their support for opposing sides. So this understanding suggests that Assad's removal happened through a form of consensus in which Moscow and Ankara would come together and agreed on this process, because after Assad regime, what we have seen in Syria is that the country is eager, and the people also are eager, and the politicians are also eager to have stable Syria, which will also produce and give a lot of opportunities both for Russia and for Turkey.
And is there anything that Russia, you think, has lost in Syria which it may now hope to regain with a new government in Damascus?
Well, actually, I don't want to say that Russia has lost, because the main let's say, pillar of Russia in Syria was its military bases and the relations with the Syrian state. It has not stopped. I mean, the Syrian regime, the new interim government of Ahmed Shara, has not, stopped relations with Russia. And as you also see that the new government, or the interim president Ahmed Shara, considers that having good relations or good ties with Russia also emboldens Syria to encounter or to balance the dependency on the West. So I think Russia has not lost, but of course the most, let's say, easily seen actor in this game, Syrian gamble, let's say, Iran and the proxies of Iran, they have lost the game. After, of course, 7 October, we have seen that Hezbollah and other fractions of Iranian proxies, they have lost the game. But Russia is acting pragmatically, seeking to redefine relations with Syria. Of course, there is one priority for Russia to keep the military bases in Hmeim and also in Tartus.
And Syria seems to be in a much better negotiation position under its new leadership now. What ways can Syria exercise its position for its gain and future prosperity?
Well, as you also see, that Russia is a big country and powerful country, and has a lot of initiatives to transform the regional balance of power in region, in Syria, in Libya, and other parts of the region, let's say in Caucasus also. So for new government in Syria, it is also crucial to not side with Russia, but at least have a sense of understanding in which they can cooperate. I mean, what I call this normalization process, let's say, managing the rivalry. There is still not a kind of consensus among these actors, Russia and Syria. They do diverge in terms of political priorities, but it is also obvious that both countries are eager to see Syria as a stable country, and also you also understand that Russia is big and also powerful country in terms of oil price. So, and Syria has also a lot of oil, let's say, facilities that can be produced by cooperation with Russia, and also be sold by, let's say, have kind of agreement with Russia.
Definitely. And also in the meeting that they had between the two leaders, the topic of his predecessor to be sent back to Syria was also on the agenda. Why was that of importance, do you think?
Well, the new president of Syria, of course, has been fighting against this tyranny, this dictator, Bashar al-Assad. Of course, the issue of Bashar al-Assad is his extradition is undoubtedly significant. It is natural for the president al-Bashar to demand Assad's return to Syria, given his responsibility for killing civilians, destroying the country, and enabling systemic corruption. So Assad, that has been told by Syrians that Assad should be tried and judged in Syria. However, this demand is largely symbolic, and Russia is highly unlikely to hand over Assad, as Moscow granted him asylum. So in this context, the real loser of this transition are Assad regime, its family, and the other actors, as I told you, the Iranian proxy in the region.
And just going back to Syria's prosperity, what's the best next moves for Syria under its new regime, under the new government of, certain actors, its neighbors? What is the best next steps for Syria to make?
Well, the first one is to keep the revolution alive, because what we have seen from the previous revolution process in Egypt, even it didn't last 1 year. So we are almost 1 year anniversary of the Syrian revolution. The new political elites have understood that the first priority is preserving the revolution without, let's say, demonizing or without preventing the other actors or anti-revolutionary actors from intervening or involving the revolution process or stopping the revolution process to be alive. This is the first priority. That's why Ahmed Shara and his colleagues or friends have been eager to diversify the foreign policy choices. That's why Ahmed Shara was eager to at least speak with Trump, and he also sent his foreign minister Shibani to Moscow before his travel. So it is also obvious that the first one is preserving the revolution. The second one is diversification policy. The third one is the increasing the investment from all over the world, because Syria is now below the zero in terms of infrastructure, which has been destroyed by the Syrian regime, the previous Assad regime. So I think there are at least three priorities in the hands of these new political elites that have been tried to implement by these visits or travels.
And with that, obviously, with al-Bashar seeing the Russian President Vladimir Putin, do you think, what's the relationship with the US and his relationship with Trump? Is that something that they need to work on, or is that quite a substantial relationship that they have between the two nations?
If you ask the relations between Syria and the United States, of course, it is also obvious that Ahmed Shara has clearly understood that with the US and Western sanction, you can't live. I mean, the Syrian people will, after the revolution, they will ask that, of course, okay, we now have a revolution, we now have freedom of speech and other things, but we can't live, we can't survive because of this Western sanctions. So that's why he understood that the removal of the sanctions imposed by the United States and the European Union must be lifted to preserve the revolution. That's why the first meetings or the first statements by Ahmed Shara was directly targeted to the Western audience and the first Western political elites. And of course, there will not be a good relations with Syria and the United States as much we hope, because the United States has been eager and has been supporting the Israeli governments, and these Israeli governments have been bombing Syria several times after these revolutions. So there is, and still Israel has been expanding the occupation to south of Syria. So there will be some sort of reserves. in which both countries will not agree upon. But I think Syria will have a say in terms of Trump, because Trump is also a pragmatic man. He has been eager to invest in almost all countries. He wants money, and this is what Ahmed Shara is willing to do with Trump, because if you have a kind of ground that you can cooperate with Trump, that's okay. Trump can do whatever he wants.
Well, that's really interesting. Thank you for your insights and for joining me today, Mr. Rakib Oglu. Thank you.
I thank you for having me.
You're up to date with the world news for the hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.